Did ancient black gods build civilization? This is the forbidden question mainstream history refuses to answer. Long before pharaohs ruled Egypt or temples rose in Mesopotamia, legends speak of powerful black deities, creators, architects, and cosmic rulers, who laid the foundations of human knowledge, spirituality, and society. From the mysterious Osiris to the Nubian gods of the Nile, ancient texts and oral traditions across Africa whisper of divine beings who shaped the world. In this video, we journey deep into ancient Africa's hidden legacy to uncover the shocking truth. Were black gods the original builders of civilization? The answers may surprise you. The hidden foundations of civilization. Throughout history, dominant narratives have often painted the origins of civilization in tones that erase or marginalize the contributions of black and African peoples. While mainstream accounts typically credit Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome as the cradles of civilization, an older, deeper, and more sacred story exists, one preserved in oral traditions, hidden scrolls, and crumbling temples. The idea that ancient black gods were the original architects of civilization. This idea challenges more than just academia. It confronts the very foundations of spiritual, historical, and cultural identity. Were the first gods those who taught humanity agriculture, science, law, and spirituality, African in origin? Did these deities, often cloaked in myth and legend, actually lay the groundwork for what we now call civilization? In this exploration, we dive deep into ancient African cosmologies, sacred traditions, and archaeological findings to reclaim a truth long buried. Yes, ancient black gods played a foundational role in building the earliest forms of civilization, and the evidence is both powerful and profound. The concept of gods in ancient civilizations. Before exploring specific African deities, it's important to understand what gods represented in ancient times. These beings were not always supernatural entities floating in the heavens. In many cultures, especially in Africa, gods were divine ancestors, celestial beings, or immortalized leaders who guided humanity and embodied universal forces like creation, order, and justice. In African cosmology, the divine was interwoven with humanity, not separated from it. Gods often walked among men, taught them essential knowledge, and left behind spiritual blueprints for civilization. Kemet, ancient Egypt, the pinnacle of black divinity. Let's begin with Kemet, known today as ancient Egypt. Despite modern whitewashing, overwhelming evidence confirms that the original inhabitants of Kemet were black Africans. Scholars like Cheikh Anta Diop and Dr. John Henrik Clarke have proven through forensic analysis, linguistics, and cultural anthropology that the founders of Egypt came from deeper Africa, especially Nubia, Sudan, and Ethiopia. But what of the gods? Kemet's pantheon was rich with deities who reflected African values and aesthetics. Osiris, Asar, a black god associated with resurrection, agriculture, and divine kingship. Osiris was depicted with dark green or jet black skin, symbolizing fertility and the life-giving power of the Nile. Isis, Set, the powerful black goddess of magic, motherhood, and healing. She was venerated across Africa and even in Europe during the Roman Empire. Ra, the sun god, whose solar power represented not just heat and light, but divine order, Ma'at. Ra traveled the heavens by day and the underworld by night, maintaining the cosmic balance. These gods were not myths to the Kemites. They were living realities, embedded in daily life, governance, and architecture. Temples, pyramids, and spiritual rituals weren't just religious. They were technologies of alignment with divine laws passed down by these gods. Nubia and Kush, the mother of Kemet. Even older than Egypt was Nubia, also known as Kush, a black African civilization stretching along the Nile in present-day Sudan and southern Egypt. The Nubians not only rivaled Egypt, but preceded it in many cultural aspects. Nubian gods were precursors to some Egyptian ones. Deities like Apidmak, a lion-headed warrior god, symbolized strength and royal authority. The worship of Ammonius, later central in Thebes, Kemet, actually originated in Nubia, where his cult was powerful and deeply revered. In fact, the 25th dynasty of Egypt was ruled by the Kushite pharaohs, often referred to as the Black Pharaohs. They revived ancient traditions, rebuilt temples, and emphasized a return to spiritual purity, echoing the divine legacy of their godly ancestors. Ethiopia, the land of the gods. The ancient Greeks referred to Ethiopia as the land of the gods, and not without reason. Ethiopia holds one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions, but its spiritual history predates Christianity by millennia. The Kebra Nagast, Ethiopia's sacred national epic, speaks of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, divine bloodlines, and heavenly artifacts like the Ark of the Covenant, which is claimed to reside in Aksum to this day. Ethiopian traditions speak of beings like Tawahedo angels, celestial guides responsible for keeping divine order; Negus rulers, kings believed to descend from divine ancestry, linking them to heaven itself. Additionally, Lalibela, the ancient city of rock-hewn churches, is said to have been constructed with the help of angels and divine architects. Such stories blur the line between God and man, reinforcing the belief that divine black beings shape society. Dogon knowledge, extraterrestrial or divine. The Dogon people of Mali have baffled scientists for decades. Their oral traditions describe the Sirius star system, including stars invisible to the naked eye, with extraordinary precision. They speak of Namo, amphibious, godlike beings who came from the sky and taught them mathematics, agriculture, and spiritual knowledge. Western researchers initially dismissed these stories as myth. But when astronomers later confirmed the existence of Sirius B, a white dwarf star only detectable with modern telescopes, everything changed. Was the Dogon knowledge extraterrestrial? Perhaps. Or maybe the Namo were divine ancestors, now mythologized as gods. Either way, the story aligns with a global pattern: black deities or divine beings bestowing civilization upon humanity. Yoruba Ifa and the Orisha, West Africa's divine blueprint. In West Africa, particularly among the Yoruba people, we find one of the most elaborate and living pantheons on earth. The Orisha are divine beings who govern natural forces, moral principles, and aspects of human life. Examples include Obatala, the father of creation, a wise and peaceful deity who molded humanity from clay. Ogun, the god of iron, war, and technology, a patron of civilization's builders and warriors. Orunmila, the Orisha of wisdom, divination, and fate, known as the custodian of the Ifa oracle. These deities are not abstract concepts. In Yoruba tradition, they're invoked, honored, and communed with through ritual and ceremony. Each Orisha represents a divine principle tied directly to the growth and sustenance of civilization, agriculture, law, family, and innovation. The existence of such a rich spiritual system confirms that black civilizations did not merely receive civilization, they created it, guided by their own gods. Colonial erasure and the demonization of black divinity. So, if ancient black gods were once central to global spiritual systems, why don't we hear more about them today? The answer lies in colonialism, white supremacy, and religious conquest. When European powers colonized Africa and the Americas, they demonized native gods to justify domination. Black deities were recast as pagan or demonic. African spirituality was criminalized. Temples were destroyed. Sacred texts were burned. This cultural genocide was part of a broader effort to erase the divine image of the black race. The Bible, when reinterpreted through colonial lenses, became a weapon of suppression. The gods of Africa were replaced with European depictions of Jesus and angels, almost always white. But truth cannot be buried forever. Today, as scholars and seekers dig deeper into ancient records and oral traditions, the gods are returning, not in myth, but in truth and empowerment, reclaiming the divine narrative. Why does this matter? Because civilization is more than roads, cities, or writing systems. Civilization is a reflection of divine intelligence expressed through human culture. When black gods are removed from history, black people are cut off from their sacred inheritance. To reclaim our divine narrative is to reclaim dignity, wisdom, and power. It allows us to see African history not as one of slavery and colonization, but of creation and contribution. It means realizing that the black body was once viewed as sacred. The black face was once carved into temples, not just chains. The black mind once governed empires and understood the stars. It means acknowledging that the very idea of civilization may have originated from divine black beings, and that history, in many ways, began in Africa not just biologically, but spiritually. Echoes through time. History is not just a record of dates and events. It is a living memory that shapes identity, power, and purpose. And though the sands of time may have buried temples and kings, the spirit of a people and their legacy never truly dies. Across continents, in the DNA of cultures, languages, religions, and technologies, the contributions of ancient black civilizations still pulse beneath the surface of our modern world. Whether through spiritual traditions, scientific knowledge, or cultural values, the legacy of Africa's ancient greatness lives on. This legacy, often ignored, erased, or distorted, continues to rise from the ashes of colonization and slavery, asserting itself through movements of cultural reclamation, intellectual awakening, and spiritual revival. In this deep exploration, we will uncover how the achievements, philosophies, and divine knowledge of black civilizations are not confined to the past. Instead, they are alive in us, waiting to be rediscovered, reawakened, and re-embodied. The builders of the first civilizations. Let's begin by anchoring the legacy in fact. Africa was not only the cradle of humanity, but also the cradle of civilization. Long before the rise of Europe or the empires of the East, Africa birthed advanced societies with systems of law, architecture, astronomy, agriculture, and governance. Ancient Kemet Egypt, Nubia, Carthage, Aksum, Great Zimbabwe, and Mali were not primitive tribal outposts. They were complex civilizations led by black minds and shaped by black hands. Ancient Kemet, with its majestic pyramids, precise calendar, and rich pantheon, is perhaps the most iconic. Yet behind its marvels was an advanced spiritual science, rooted in Maya truth, justice, balance, that governed both divine and earthly life. Timbuktu in Mali was once a beacon of learning, where African scholars studied astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy long before the European Renaissance. Aksum in Ethiopia developed a written script Guizi, adopted Christianity before most European nations, and built towering obelisks and underground churches still in use today. These were civilizations of depth, dignity, and divine order. Their fall did not erase their legacy. It simply caused it to scatter, waiting to be reassembled. Spiritual blueprints, African religions, and the sacred order. While material achievements may crumble, spiritual truths endure. African traditional religions offered sophisticated cosmologies, often far more nuanced than modern Western theology. Take the Yoruba tradition, for example. Its Orisha system outlines a spiritual ecosystem of divine forces, each representing natural elements and human virtues. Obatala created humans from clay. Ogun governed iron and warfare. Orunmila guided through wisdom and divination. These deities weren't distant idols. They were living archetypes, mirrored in human behavior and natural law. Even in the Americas, through Vodou in Haiti, Santeria in Cuba, and Candomblé in Brazil, the Orisha survived the slave trade, preserved by African descendants who merged them with Christian saints to hide them from their oppressors. This cultural resilience is the heartbeat of the legacy. Though chains tried to silence it, the spirit endured. The prayers, dances, symbols, and cosmologies traveled through generations, keeping the ancestral flame alive. Language and knowledge systems. The legacy of ancient Black civilizations also lives in language and intellectual traditions. Africans created some of the oldest known writing systems, including Medu Neter, hieroglyphics, not just pictograms, but a sacred language used to align with cosmic forces. Nsibidi, Nigeria, a symbolic system used for law, spirituality, and communication among secret societies. Guizi, Ethiopia, a liturgical language still used in Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity. These languages were not just about communication. They were vehicles of divine wisdom. The spoken word held power. To name was to create. To write was to consecrate. Furthermore, African knowledge systems emphasized holistic learning, blending science with spirit, art with ethics. African societies had healers who were also astronomers, priests who were mathematicians. This unity of knowledge reflected an integrated worldview, one where life was sacred, interconnected, and ordered by divine law. Science, medicine, and mathematics. Contrary to colonial myth, Black civilizations were deeply scientific. The legacy lives on in ancient achievements that still baffle modern minds. Commission surgeons practiced brain surgery, bone setting, and herbal medicine, recording their work in the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts on Earth. Dogon cosmology included accurate knowledge of the Sirius star system, including the existence of Sirius B, centuries before the invention of the telescope. Malian architects used fractal geometry in their city designs, structures that mirrored the patterns of nature and consciousness. These weren't mere superstitions. They were grounded, practical applications of sacred science. Today, Black scientists and scholars around the world are rediscovering this legacy and integrating it into new frontiers, from bioengineering to quantum physics. Cultural influence and global diaspora. The legacy of ancient Black civilizations is not limited to the African continent. Through migration, conquest, trade, and enslavement, African culture has permeated every corner of the globe. In the Caribbean, African rhythms birthed reggae, calypso, and dancehall. In South America, candomblé and capoeira blended martial arts, dance, and spirituality. In the United States, jazz, hip-hop, blues, and gospel all spring from African roots. Even beyond music, Black traditions in food, storytelling, hairstyles, fashion, and community organization have shaped global culture in profound ways. These are not remnants of the past. They are living expressions of a powerful ancestral identity that has never stopped evolving. Resistance and reclamation. For centuries, colonizers worked to erase African legacies. Statues were defaced. Temples were buried. Oral histories were forbidden. Even the portrayal of Jesus, the angels, and the saints was altered to erase the Black image from divinity. But the story did not end there. The 20th and 21st centuries have seen a renaissance of African identity and pride. Leaders like Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, Malcolm X, and Haile Selassie called for the awakening of the African soul and the return to ancestral greatness. Today, scholars, artists, and spiritual leaders across the diaspora are resurrecting ancient wisdom. Afrofuturism imagines futures shaped by African culture and science. African-centered education challenges Eurocentric curricula and reteaches children about Kemet, Mali, Nubia, and beyond. Spiritual movements like Ifa, Kemeticism, and Rastafarianism are reconnecting people to pre-colonial spiritual paths. This is not nostalgia, it is restoration. It is a movement to honor what was lost, to heal generational wounds, and to rise with the wisdom of the ancestors. The legacy within, personal and collective memory. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of this legacy is how it lives within us, in our bodies, dreams, instincts, and memories. Carl Jung referred to the collective unconscious, and African traditions have long spoken of ancestral memory, the idea that the soul carries the wisdom of generations. When a child in Haiti sings a Yoruba chant without ever being taught, when a young man in Chicago instinctively drums the same beat as a brother in Ghana, when a woman dreams of pyramids she's never seen, that is the legacy living on. It is cellular, spiritual, and cosmic. It transcends time and geography. It is not about going back to Africa. It's about bringing Africa back to us, wherever we are, and honoring the divine source within. The responsibility of inheritance. To recognize this legacy is not enough. We must carry it forward. We stand on the shoulders of giants, those who built temples without machines, who aligned cities with stars, who preserved knowledge through chains and fire. To forget them is betrayal. To honor them is empowerment. How can we live this legacy? Study history beyond the textbooks. Read the works of Diop, Clark, Hilliard, and others who uncovered truths long hidden. Practice ancestral spirituality not as a trend, but as a way of reconnecting with divine law and cosmic order. Support Black culture and scholarship, not just for entertainment, but for enlightenment and empowerment. Create art, systems, ideas that reflect the wisdom of our ancestors and serve future generations. A legacy without end. The ancient Black civilizations may no longer rule empires, but their influence is immortal. Their gods still whisper through the winds. Their knowledge still pulses in our veins. Their spirit still rises through each act of truth, creativity, resistance, and love. The legacy lives on not in museums or ruins, but in us. And as we awaken to this truth, we do not merely reclaim the past. We build a future rooted in ancient power, guided by ancestral wisdom, and illuminated by a light that no empire, no system, and no lie can ever extinguish. So remember this. You are the legacy. You are the temple. You are the living proof that greatness never dies. What if everything we've been taught about the origins of civilization is missing a vital piece, the role of ancient Black gods? From ancient Ethiopia to Kemet, their influence echoes through time, hidden beneath layers of erased history and colonial narratives. As we rediscover these truths, we're not just rewriting history, we're reclaiming it. If this video challenged your perspective, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more eye-opening content. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you believe about the gods who shaped our world? Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and stay awakened to the truth.